Hey 4-H, it's Miss Hosman again. I'm here to read some more Fablehaven. We are on chapter 11, Aftermath. So we're going to find out what happens after Midsummer's Eve and all the chaos that brought. Kendra knew it would be bad the moment she opened the door. Ragged gouges furrowed the walls of the stairwell. Crude pictograms defaced the far side of the door, along with an abundance of less orderly nicks and scratches. Near the base of the stairs, a crusty brown substance was smeared on the wall. I'm grabbing some salt, Seth said. He returned the ring around the bed and filled his hands and pockets with salt that had scorched the intruder the night before. When Seth rejoined her, Kendra started down the stairs. The steps were creaking loudly in the quiet house. The hall at the bottom was worse than the stairway. Again, the walls had been savagely raked by claws. The bathroom door was off its hinges and had 3 splintery holes of different sizes. Patches of carpeting were burned and stained. Kendra moved down the hall, appalled by the aftermath of the violent night. A smashed mirror, a broken light fixture, a table reduced to kindling. At the end of the hall, a gaping rectangle instead of a window. Looks like they let others in, Kendra said, pointing down the hall. Seth was examining singed hairs on a damp stain on the floor. Grandpa? He yelled. Anybody? The silence was an ominous answer. Kendra descended the stairs into the entry hall. Sections of the banister were gone. The front window hung askew, an arrow protruding from the frame. Primitive drawings marred the walls, some scored, some scrawled. In a trance, Kendra roamed the lower rooms of the house. The place had been gutted. Almost all the windows were destroyed. Battered doors lay afar from their frames. Mutilated furniture bled stuffing onto mangled carpeting. Shredded drapes dangled in tattered ribbons. Chandeliers lay in shattered ruins. Half of one charred sofa was entirely missing. Kendra wandered to the back porch. Wind chimes lay in tangles. The furniture was scattered around the garden. A broken rocking chair balanced atop a fountain. A wicker love seat protruded from a hedge. Back in the house, Kendra found Seth in Grandpa's office. It looked as if an anvil had fallen on the desk. Pulverized memorabilia littered the floor. Everything's trash, Seth said. It looks like the demolition team came through here with sledgehammers. Or hand grenades, Seth indicated where tar appeared to have been slopped on the wall. Is that blood? It's too dark to be human. Seth picked his way around the splintered desk to the empty window. Maybe they got out. I hope so. Out on the lawn, Seth said, Is that a person? Kendra approached the window. Dale, she shouted. The prone figure did not move. Come on, Seth said, hurrying to the wreckage. Kendra followed him out the front door and around to the side of the house. They dashed over to find the figure lying on the ground near an overturned bird bath. Oh no, Seth said. It was a painted statue of Dale, a faithful replica, except the paint was more simplified than his actual coloring would have been. His head was turned to one side, eyes squinted shut, arms raised protectively. The proportions were exact. He was wearing the same outfit he had worn the previous night. Kendra touched the figure. It was made of metal, clothes and all. Bronze, maybe? Lead? Steel? She wrapped her knuckles against the forearm. Sounded solid. No hollow ringing. I think they turned him into a statue, Seth said. You really think it's him? It has to be. Help me flip him over. Both of them strained, but Dale did not budge. He was way too heavy. I really blew it, Seth said, palms pressed against his temples. What have I done? Maybe we can change him back. Seth kneeled down and put his mouth to Dale's ear. If you can hear me, give us a sign, he yelled. The metallic figure made no response. Do you think Grandpa and Lena are around here too? Kendra asked. We'll have to look. Kendra cupped her hands around her mouth. Grandpa! Grandpa Sorensen! Lena, can you hear me? Look at this, Seth said, crouching beside the overturned bird bath. The bird bath had tipped over into a flower bed. The flower bed was there was a clear footprint, 3 large toes and a narrow heel. The print was big enough to suggest that it came from a creature at least the size of a grown man. A giant bird? Check out the hole behind the heel. He stuck a finger into the nickel-sized hole. It's a couple inches deep. Weird. Seth acted excited. It has a pointy thing on the back of its heel, like a spur or something. Which means what? We can probably track it. Track it? Seth moved forward in the direction the toes pointed, scanning the ground. See? He crouched, pointing at the hole in the lawn. That spur digs deep. It should leave a clear trail. And what happens if you catch up to whatever made the tracks? He patted his pockets. I'll throw some salt and rescue Grandpa. How do you know that it took Grandpa? I don't, he admitted, but it's a start. What if it turns you into a painted statue? I won't look directly at it, just in mirrors. Where did you get that idea from? History. You don't even know what you're talking about, Kendra said. We'll see about that. I better get my camo shirt. First, let's make sure there aren't any other statues in the yard. Fine, then I'm out of here. I don't want the trail to get cold. After scouring the yard for half an hour, Kendra and Seth came across various articles of furniture from the house or porch in unexpected locations, but they had found no other life-sized painted statues. They ended up by the swimming pool. Have you noticed the butterflies? Kendra asked. Yeah. Anything special about them? Seth slapped his forehead with the heel of his hand. We haven't had any milk today. Yep, no fairies, just bugs. If those fairies are smart, they won't show their faces around here, growled Seth. Yeah, you'll show them. What do you want to be this time? A giraffe? None of this would have happened if they had kept guarding the window. You did torture one of them, Kendra pointed out. They tortured me back. We're even. Whatever we do, we should drink some milk first. They went into the house, and the refrigerator was lying on its side. Together, they pried the door open. Some of the milk bottles had broken, but a few were intact. Kendra grabbed one, uncapped it, and took a sip. Seth drank the next. I need my stuff, he said, bolting for the stairs. Kendra started searching for clues. Wouldn't Grandpa have tried to leave them a message? Maybe there hadn't been time. She walked through the rooms, but encountered no hints to explain the fate of either Lena or Grandpa. Seth showed up in his camouflage shirt, carrying the cereal box. I was trying to find that shotgun. I haven't seen it. Nope. There's an arrow by the front door. You could toss that at the monster. I think we'll stick with the salt. We never checked the basement, Kendra said. Worth a try. They opened the door by the kitchen and stared down into the gloom. Kendra realized it was just about the only undamaged door in the house. Some stone steps led to the darkness. How about that flashlight? Kendra said. No light switch, he asked. They couldn't find one. He rummaged through the cereal box and withdrew the flashlight. With some salt in his pocket clutched in one hand and the flashlight with another, Seth led the way. It was a longer flight than it would ordinarily lead to a basement. More than 20 steep stairs. At the bottom, the flashlight beam illuminated a short barren hallway ending at an iron door. They walked to the door. It had a keyhole below the handle. Seth tugged on the handle, but the door was locked. There was a small hatch at the base of the door. What's this? He asked. I think it's for the brownies so they can come in and fix stuff. He pushed open the hatch. Grandpa! Lena! Anybody? They waited in vain for a reply. He called once more before standing and shining his light into the keyhole. None of your keys would fit this? He asked. They're way too small. There might be a key stashed in Grandpa's bedroom. If they were down here, I think they'd answer. Kendra and Seth started back up the stairs. At the top, they heard a loud, deep groan that lasted at least 10 seconds. The penetrating sound came from outside. It was much too powerful to have been made by a human. They raced to the back porch. The groan had ended. It was difficult to say from which direction it had started. They waited, looking around, expecting a recurrence of the unusual sound. After a tense minute or two, Kendra broke the silence. What was that? I bet it was whatever has Grandpa or Lena, Seth said. And it didn't sound from too far off. It sounded big, yeah, like whale big. We have the salt, Seth reminded her. We need to follow the trail. Are you sure that this is a good idea? Do you have a better one? I don't know. Let's wait and see if they show up. Maybe they'll escape. If that hasn't happened by now, it's not going to. We'll be careful, and we'll make sure we get back before it's dark. We'll be fine. We have the salt. That stuff works like acid. If anything goes wrong, who will save us? Kendra asked. You don't have to come, but I'm going. Seth hurried down the porch steps and started across the yard. Kendra reluctantly followed. She wasn't sure how they would pull off a rescue if scalding the monster of salt failed. But with Seth right about one thing, they couldn't just abandon Grandpa. Kendra's caught up with Seth at the flower bed where they had originally found the prints. Combing through the grass together, they followed a series of nickel-sized holes across the lawn. The holes were spaced roughly 5 feet apart and followed a generally straight line, passing the barn and eventually leaving the yard along a narrow path into the woods. No longer obscured by grass, the tracks were even easier to follow. They passed a couple of intersecting paths, but the way was always certain. The prints of whatever creature had left the holes were unmistakable. They made rapid progress. Kendra remained alert, searching the trees for mythical beasts, but spotted nothing more more spectacular than a goldfinch bird and some chipmunks. I'm starving, Seth announced. I'm okay. I'm kind of getting sleepy, though. Just don't think about it. My throat is getting sore, Kendra went on. You know, we've been up for almost like 30 hours. I'm not that tired, Seth said. Just hungry. We should have foraged for food in the pantry. It can't all be smashed. We must not be too hungry if we didn't think about it at the time. So suddenly, Seth stopped short. Uh-oh. What? Seth went a few paces forward. Leaning close to the ground, he worked his way past Kendra. He went forward again more slowly, kicking aside any leaves or branches on the trail. Kendra realized the problem before Seth vocalized it. There's no more holes. She helped scan the ground. They both scrutinized the same segment of the path multiple times before Seth began to search the trail. This could be bad, he said. There's a lot of undergrowth, Kendra agreed. If we could even find one hole, we'd know which direction it went. If it left the path we'll never be able to follow it. Seth crawled on his hands and knees along the edge of the path, sifting through the mulch beneath the undergrowth. Kendra picked up a stick and used it to poke around. Don't make any holes, Seth cautioned. I'm just moving leaves. You should do it with your hands. If I wanted bug bites and a rash. Hey, this is it. He showed Kendra a hole about 5 feet from the last one on the path. It turned left, diagonally. She made a line with her hand, connecting the 2 dots, continuing into the woods. But it might have turned more, Seth said. We should find another one. Finding the next hole took almost 15 minutes. It proved that the creature was indeed turned almost directly to the left, perpendicular to the path. What if it kept turning, Kendra said. It could be like backtracking if it turned more. Maybe it wanted to throw us off pursuit. Seth went forward 5 feet and found the next hole almost instantly. It confirmed that the new course was perpendicular to the trail. The undergrowth isn't as bad here, Seth said. Seth, it would take all day to track it, 20 paces. I don't mean to track it, just to walk in this direction for a while. Maybe it will intersect a trail and we can pick up the tracks again. Or maybe it doesn't live much farther from here. Kendra put a hand in her pocket, feeling for salt. I don't really like the idea of leaving the trail. Me either, but we won't go far. But it seems to like trails. If followed this one all the way, we might be close to a discovery. It's worth, going a little ways to check. Kendra stared at her brother. Okay, and what if we run into a cave? We'll take a look. What if we hear breathing coming from the cave? You don't have to go in. I'll look myself. The point is finding Grandpa. Kendra bit her tongue. She almost said that if they found him here, he would probably be in pieces. Okay, just a little ways. They walked in a straight line from the path. They kept scanning the ground, but noticed no more holes. Before long, they crossed a dry, rocky stream bed. Not far beyond, they wandered into a little meadow. The brush and wildflowers in the meadow grew nearly waist high. I don't see any other trails, Kendra said, or monster houses. Let's take a good look around the meadow, said Seth. He made a complete search of the perimeter of the meadow, finding neither holes nor trails. Let's face it, Kendra said. If we go any farther, we'll be wandering blind. What about climbing the hill? Seth suggested, indicating the highest point visible from the meadow, less than a quarter mile away. If I were going to make a home here, it would be over there. Plus, if we get up there, we have a better view of the area. These trees make it hard to see. Kendra pressed her lips together. The hill was not steep. It would be easy to climb, and it was not that far away. If we don't find anything there, we go back. Deal. They marched towards the hill, which was along a different line from the course they had originally taken from the path. As they picked up their way through the denser underbrush, a twig snapped off to one side. They paused, listening. I'm getting pretty nervous, Kendra said softly. We're fine. It's just probably a falling pine cone. Kendra tried to push away the images of the woman that she saw last night in the swirling black garments. The thought made Kendra freeze. If she saw her in the woods, Kendra worried if she would just curl into a ball on the ground and let herself be taken. I'm losing track of which way we're going, she said. Back under the trees, a line of sight to both the hill and the meadow was disrupted. I have my compass. So if all else fails, we'll find the North Pole. The trail we were following went northwest, Seth assured her, and then we left it going southwest. The hill is to the west and the meadow is to the east. Well, that's pretty good. The only trick is paying attention. Before long, the trees were thinning and they were walking up the hill. With the trees farther apart, the underbrush grew higher and the bushes were bigger. Kendra and Seth wound their way up the moderate slope towards the crest. Do you smell that? Seth asked. Kendra stopped. It smells like somebody's cooking. The smell was faint, but now that she noticed it was very distinct. Kendra studied the area with sudden alarm. Oh my gosh, she said, crouching down. What? Get down! Seth knelt beside her. Kendra pointed to the crest of the hill. Off to one side rose a feeble column of smoke, a thin, wavering distortion. Yeah, he whispered. We may have found it. Again, she had to bite her tongue. She hoped someone wasn't cooking Grandpa. What do we do? Stay here, said Seth. I'll go check it out. I don't want to stay alone. Then follow me, but stay back a bit. We don't want to both get caught at the same time. Keep the salt ready. Kendra did not need that reminder. Her only worry about the salt was that her sweaty hands were going to turn it to paste. Seth crept ahead, staying low, using the bushes for cover, gradually making his way towards the meager line of the smoke. Kendra imitated his movements, impressed that his hours of playing army were finally paying off. Even as she followed him, she struggled to come to terms with what they were doing. Sneaking up on a monster cookout was among the activities she could do without. Shouldn't they be sneaking away? The trembling shaft of smoke grew nearer. Seth waved her up to him. She huddled beside him behind a wide bush, twice her height, trying to breathe quietly. He put his lips to her ear. I'll be able to see what's going on when I get around this bush. I'll try to yell if I get captured or anything. Be ready. She put her mouth to his ear. If you play a trick on me, I promise I will kill you. I really will. I won't. I'm scared too. He slunk forward. Kendra tried to calm herself. Waiting was torture. She considered moving around the bush to take a peek, but she couldn't muster the courage. The silence was good, right? Unless it had stealthily dropped Seth with a poison dart. The paw stretched mercilessly. Then she heard Seth coming back less carefully than he had left. When he came around the bush, he was walking upright, saying, "Come here, you have to see this." "What is it?" "It's absolutely nothing scary." She went around the bush this time, still tense. Up ahead, in a clear area on the summit of a hill, she saw the source of the thin smoke. A waist-high cylinder of stone with a wooden windlass and a dangling bucket. A well? "Yeah, come smell." They walked to the well. Even up close, the rising smoke remained vapory and indistinct. Kendra leaned over, staring down into the deep darkness. "Smells amazing." "Like soup," Seth said. "Meat, veggies, spices." "Am I just hungry?" "I think it smells delicious." "I think so too. Should we try some?" "Lower the bucket?" Kendra asked skeptically. "Why not?" Seth replied. There could be creatures down there." "I don't think so," he said. "You think it's just a well full of stew?" Kendra scoffed. "We are on a magical preserve. As far as we know, it could be poisonous." "It can't hurt to take a look," Seth insisted. "I'm starving. Besides, not everyone here is bad. I bet this is where fairy people come for dinner. See, it even has a crank." He began turning the windlass, spooling the bucket down into the darkness. "I'm staying on lookout," said Kendra. "Good idea." Kendra felt exposed. They were far enough from the summit that she could not see anything on the far side of the hill, but they were high enough that she commanded an expansive view of trees, terrain when she looked down the slope. With the little cover surrounding the well, she worried that unseen eyes might be spying from the trees below. Seth continued unwinding the rope, sending the bucket even deeper. Eventually, he heard it wetly hit the bottom. The rope slackened a bit, and after a moment, he began winding the bucket back up. "Hurry," Kendra said. "I am. This thing is really deep. I'm worried that everything in the forest can see us." "Here it comes." He started cranking it, stopped cranking, and pulled the bucket up last few feet by hand, setting it on the lip of the well. Kendra joined him. Inside the wooden bucket, bits of meat, cut carrots, potato fragments, and onion floated in a fragrant yellow broth. "Looks like normal stew," Kendra said. "Better than normal. I'm trying some." "Don't," she warned. "Lighten up." He twisted a piece of dripping meat and tried it. "Good," he announced. He plucked out a potato and offered a similar report. Tipping the bucket, he slurped some of the broth. "Amazing," he said. "You have to try it." From behind the same bush they had used as their final hiding place when approaching that well, a creature emerged. Uh-oh. From the waist up, he was a shirtless man with an exceptionally hairy chest and a pair of pointy horns above his forehead. From waist down, he had the legs of a shaggy goat. Wielding a knife, the satyr charged right towards them. Both Kendra and Seth turned in alarm at the sound of his hooves racing up the slope. "Salt!" Seth blurted, dipping into his pockets. As she fumbled for the salt, Kendra dashed around the well, placing herself between herself and the attacker, not Seth. He stood his ground, and when the satyr was a couple of steps away, he flung a fistful of salt at the goat man. The satyr stopped short, obviously surprised by the cloud of salt. Seth threw a second handful, groping his pockets for more. The salt failed to spark or sizzle. Instead, the satyr appeared bewildered. "What are you doing?" he asked in a hushed tone. "I could ask you the same question," Seth replied. "No, you can't. You're spoiling our operation." The satyr lunged past Seth and slashed the rope with his knife. "She's coming." "Who?" I save the questions for later," the satyr said. He wound the rope until it was tight around the windlass, seized the bucket, and started down the hill, spilling the soup as he went. From the far side of the hill, Kendra heard the trees rustling and branches crunching. She and Seth followed the satyr. The satyr slid into the bush, and Kendra had crouched behind earlier. Kendra and Seth dove alongside him. An instant they ducked out of sight. A bulky, hideous woman lumbered into view and approached the well. She had a broad, flat face with saggy earlobes that hung almost to her hefty shoulders. Her misshapen body drooped inside a coarse homespun tunic. Her avocado skin had a rigid texture, kind of like corduroy. Her graying hair was shaggy and matted, and her build bordered on obese. The well barely came to her knees, making her considerably taller than Hugo. She waddled from side to side as she walked, and she was breathing heavily through her mouth. Bending over, she pawed at the well, stroking the wooden frame. "The ogress can't see much," the satyr whispered. When he said it, the ogress jerked her head up. She yammered something in another language. Shambling a couple steps away from the well, she squatted down and sniffed the ground where Seth had thrown his salt. "There have been peoples here," she accused in a husky accent and voice. "Where you peoples be?" The satyr placed a finger against his lips. Kendra held perfectly still, trying to breathe softly despite her alarm. She tried to plan which direction she would run. The ogress lumbered down the slope towards their hiding place, sniffing high and low. I heard peoples. I smelled peoples. And I smell my stew. People's been at my stew again. You come out now and apologize. The satyr shook his head, slitting his throat with his fingers for emphasis. Seth slid a hand into his pocket. The satyr touched his wrist and shook his head with a scowl. The ogress had already closed half the distance to the bush. You peoples like my stew so much. Maybe you should take a bath in it. Kendra resisted the urge to bolt. The ogress would be on them in moments, but the satyr seemed to know what he was doing. He held up a hand, signaling for them to keep still. Without warning, something began crashing through the bushes about 20 yards to the right. The ogress pivoted and stumbled towards the ruckus with a loud and awkward gait. The satyr nodded. They scrambled out of the bush and started down the hill. Behind them, the ogress skidded to a halt and changed direction, coming after them. The goat man pinched the bucket of stew into a tangled patch of thorns and bounded over a fallen log. Kendra and Seth sprinted after him. Propelled by her downward momentum, Kendra found herself taking larger steps than she wanted. Each time her foot touched the ground became a fresh opportunity to lose her balance and tumble forward. Seth stayed a couple steps ahead of her, and the swift satyr was gradually increasing his lead. Heedless of the obstacles, the ogress pursued them noisily, trampling bushes and tearing through the branches. She breathed in damp, wheezing gasps and yelled periodically, reverting to her unintelligible language. Despite her cumbersome size and apparent exhaustion, the misshapen ogress was rapidly gaining. The slope leveled out, and behind Kendra, the ogress fell, branches and deadfalls snapping like fireworks. Kendra glanced back, catching a glimpse of the burly ogress surging to her feet. The satyr led them to a shallow ravine where they found a wide entrance to a dark tunnel. This way, he said, dashing into the tunnel. Although it looked spacious enough for the ogress to enter, Seth and Kendra followed without question. The satyr appeared confident, and he had been right so far. The tunnel grew darker and deeper as they ran. Heavy footsteps followed them. Kendra glanced back. The ogress filled the passageway, blocking much of the light that filtered into the opening. It became hard to see the satyr up ahead. The tunnel was growing narrower. Close behind Kendra, the ogress gasped and coughed. Hopefully, she would have a heart attack and collapse. For a space, the darkness became complete. Then it began to brighten. The tunnel continued to shrink. Soon Kendra had to crouch, and the walls were within each reach on either side. The satyr slackened its pace, looking back with a mischievous grin. Kendra checked over her shoulder as well. The panting ogress crawled and then scooted forward on her belly, wheezing and choking. When she could worm no farther, she roared in frustration, a strained, throaty cry. After that, it kind of sounded like she threw up. Up ahead, the satyr was crawling. The passage slanted upward. They emerged through a small gap in a depression. A second satyr stood waiting for them. The second had redder hair than the first and slightly longer horns. He motioned for them to follow. The two satyrs and two children charged recklessly through the woods for a few more minutes. When they arrived at a clearing with a tiny pond, the red-headed satyr stopped and faced the others. What was that idea ruining our operation? He asked. Clumsy work, the other satyr agreed. We didn't know, Kendra said. We thought it was a well. You thought a chimney was a well? The red-headed complained. I suppose you sometimes mistake icicles for carrots and wagons for outhouses. I had a bucket, Seth said, and it was in the ground, Kendra added. They do have a point, the other satyr said. You were on the roof of the ogress's lair, explained the redhead. Okay, we get it now, Seth said. We thought it was a hill. Nothing wrong with pinching a bit of soup from her cauldron, the redheaded continued. We try to be free with our assets, but you need to use some delicacy, a little finesse. At least wait until the old lady falls asleep. Who are you, anyway? Seth Sorensen? Kendra? I am Newell, said the redhead, and this is Doran. You realize we probably have to construct a whole new rigging? She'll rip the old one down, Doran explained. Almost more work than cooking our own stew, Newell huffed. We can't make it come out like she does, Doran moaned. She has a gift, Newell agreed. We're sorry, Kendra said. We were a little lost. Doran waved a hand. Don't worry. We just like to bluster. If you spoiled our wine, that would be another story. Still, Newell asked. A guy has to eat. Free stew is free stew. We'll try to find a way to repay you, Kendra said. So will we, Newell said. But do you happen to have any batteries? Doran asked. Batteries? Seth asked, wrinkling his nose. Size C, Newell clarified. Kendra folded her arms. Why do you want batteries? They're shiny, Newell said, nudging Doran with an elbow. We worship them, Doran said, nodding sagely. They seem like little gods to us. The kids stared at the goatman in disbelief, unsure how to continue the conversation. They were obviously lying. Okay, Newell said. We have a portable television. Don't tell Stan. We had a mountain of batteries, but we ran out, and our supplier is no longer employed here. We could work out an arrangement. Newell spread his hands out diplomatically. Some batteries to repent for disrupting our stew siphoning. Then we can trade for more. Gold, whatever you'd like. Doran lowered his voice slightly. Of course, we would need to keep our arrangement private. Stan doesn't like us watching the tube, said Newell. You know our grandpa? Seth asked. Who doesn't? Have you seen him lately, Kendra asked. Sure, just last week, Doran said. I mean, last night. No, why? Newell said. Haven't you heard, Seth asked. The satyrs shrugged at each other. What's the news? Newell asked. Our grandpa was kidnapped last night, Kendra said. Your grandfather is a kid? Newell said. They mean, he was abducted, Doran. They mean that he was abducted, Doran clarified. Kendra nodded. Creatures got into the house and took him and our housekeeper. Not Dale, Doran said. We don't think so, Seth said. Newell shook his head. Poor Dale. Never been very popular. Lousy sense of humor, Doran said. Too quiet. You guys don't know who might have taken him, Kendra asked. On Midsummer Eve, Newell said, tossing up his hands. It could be anybody. Your guess is better than mine. Could you help us find him, Seth asked. The satyrs shared an uneasy glance. Yeah, ouch. Newell began uncomfortably. This is kind of a bad week for us. Lots of commitments, though. Yeah, Doran confirmed, backing away. You know, now that I thought on it, Newell said, we may need a new rigging on the chimney anyhow. How about we go our separate ways and call it even? Don't take anything we've said to heart, Doran said. We were just, being ourselves. Seth stepped forward. Do you know something that you're not telling us? It isn't that, Newell said, continuing his slow retreat. It's just Midsummer Day. We're booked. Thanks for helping us get away from the Ogress, Kendra said. Our pleasure, Newell replied. All part of the package, Doran added. Could you guys at least point us towards home? Seth asked. The satyrs stopped retreating. Doran extended an arm. The path's over there. When you reach it, go right, Newell said. That will get you started in the right direction. Give our best to Stan when he turns up. And then the satyrs hastily turned and dashed off into the trees. So in this chapter, we met some new creatures, the Ogress and the satyrs. And Dale is a statue. And we don't know where Grandpa and Lena are. So the next chapter is called Inside the Barn, and we will get to that soon. Thanks for listening.